that yes, President Trump and I did have a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and I don't ever relay private conversations like that, but you know, be fair to guess that we had a little chat about Brexit and where it was going, and you can guess what I might have said. And of course, Brexit is dominating absolutely everything. We're now less than a fortnight away from this huge vote. I mean, it is one of the most important votes in our lifetimes that's taken place in Parliament. And part of that is, of course, this challenge that Theresa May put out to have a debate about it. Isn't it funny? She wouldn't debate head-to-head with Corbyn at the general election, but she's happy to do so over her deal. Let's listen to Jeremy Corbyn on these debates.
All I know is that I've accepted the idea of a debate, very happy to do so. I did that on Sunday night as soon as the Prime Minister made the suggestion. The ITV offer seemed a sensible one. It reaches a wide audience, and the timing looked good to me because it's not inconveniencing people who may wish to watch other things later in the evening. One should always have respect for the viewers. And also, we want to get the widest possible
so your
and most
debate
diverse
is based
audience
around people being able to watch the I'm a Celebrity final.
Indeed, sir. Maybe I want to watch it myself as well.
Jeremy Corbyn watches I'm a Celebrity. I'm not sure I believe that. Maybe he does. Hey, I don't know. But so that's where we are. Both in principle have agreed to do this debate, but there is an impasse in that Theresa May wants it to be at the BBC and Jeremy Corbyn wants it to be on ITV. Is this debate going to happen or isn't it? I think in the end it kind of probably will, because if either one of them is seen to have blocked it, it would not look good. But what was fascinating, I think, in the last 24 hours is that we spend an inordinate amount of time talking about divisions within the Conservative Party, particularly the Parliamentary Party, on Brexit. And, you know, we kind of know what Jacob Rees-Mogg's position is and what the Prime Minister's position is, particularly over this deal. But one of the stories that hasn't really had much attention is the way that the Labour Party position on Brexit has been slowly but surely shifting since the last general election. Remember, Labour, post the referendum, said they would respect and implement the vote. Jeremy Corbyn himself, saying in interviews that, of course, we can't stay part of the single market because effectively that'd be like being part of the European Union. But there's been a change. And John McDonnell said this yesterday. Have a listen to this.
We want a deal that will protect jobs and the economy. If we can't achieve that, the government can't achieve that, we think we can. If the government can't achieve that, we should have a general election.
Which you know
as well as I do. It's
very
difficult to do because of the nature of the legislation that David Cameron brought forward. If that's not possible, we'll be calling upon the government then to join us in a public vote. And again, it's difficult to judge this at each stage, but that's the sequence, I think, that will inevitably go through over this period.
So it would be inevitable that if a vote of no confidence didn't bring down the government in a general election, it is inevitable, to use that word that you just used, there would be another vote.
Well, that's right. We've said our policy is if we can't get a general election, well, then the other option, which we've kept on the table, is a people's vote.
Well, and you could argue he was ever so slightly being talked into saying that it was inevitable, but certainly the strongest backing to date that we've seen from the Shadow Chancellor for a second referendum. Now, this has led to considerable backpedalling, and Labour sources later suggested McDonnell had contradicted himself as well as the party. And the quote here is, he did not represent what he or the Labour Party thinks. Just try that one more time. The source from the Labour Party says that John McDonnell did not represent what he or the Labour Party thinks. So they are in a bit of a mess on this. But I repeat the point. There's been a direction of travel. Just last week, Jeremy Corbyn in the House of Commons said what Labour were looking for was a single market and customs union deal. That is a long way away from where he was 12 to 18 months ago. And remember that amongst the activist base of Labour, there is huge support out there for a second referendum, or, as Alistair Campbell would style it, a people's vote, particularly coming from groups like Momentum. Remember, their MPs in the House of Commons are overwhelmingly pro-EU. Now, look, I know that Corbyn himself is a Leaver. And yet, there are Labour MPs like Kate Hoey who are very strong Leavers. And there are 5 million Labour voters who voted to leave. But against that, I think this direction of travel is clear. I think it's only a matter of time frankly, before the Labour Party come out and support the second referendum. It's an issue over which I believe Jeremy Corbyn is simply going to have to give in. And when we get to that point, the Labour betrayal on Brexit will be complete. That, folks, is where I think it's going. So, you tell me, has John McDonnell let the cat out of the bag? And if you think, yep, that's where Labour are going, call 0345 6060 973. Or maybe you think, no, Corbyn is a leaver, he's been one for 35 years, he'll stick to his guns. Text to 84850 and tell me, do you have a fresh Brexit solution for a Labour Party that has really struggled over the course of the last couple of years to give many clear answers on this issue? If you can, then do tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and of course, watch us on Facebook and comment there too. I'm going to Snodland in Kent to speak to Josh, a new caller to the show. Josh, good evening.
Hi, good evening, Nigel.
So, did McDonnell let the cat out of the bag? Are Labour very close? Maybe in the run-up to this debate, maybe on debate night itself if it happens. Is Corbyn going to say at some point it's a second referendum?
Well, it's an interesting point you make that Corbyn has his principles. He has been a leader for a long time, and I think he's going to stick to his principles, but he knows that his time is probably short as Labour leader, and they wouldn't win another general election if it was called.
Well,
so I can't really. I think the majority of Labour supporters are very split on this issue. If Labour wasn't backing a people's vote, they might not win. If they were backing the people's vote, they might not win.
Well, that's certainly true. And Josh, that's rather like the comment that at the moment there isn't a majority in the House of Commons for any of the permutations possible. But isn't the truth of it, Josh? And, listen, I've already said there are 5 million Labour voters out there who voted Brexit. But isn't the pressure within the Westminster sort of, pressure room, isn't it so great that in the end, Corbyn's got to give in to it?
I expect so, and I do think, agree with you, the momentum is moving for Labour and continues to move. I think every poll that comes out, and you can't put all your faith on polls, obviously, as we know, but every poll that has come out shows that overwhelmingly Labour supporters do seem to be backing a people's vote. But that's not to say a people's vote wouldn't end up with people accepting a Brexit deal or no deal Brexit. And maybe that's the sensible way forward rather than forcing through a deal that might not go through.
Josh, none of us know what's going to happen from here exactly. Tell me, Josh, are you tempted to vote for Corbyn's Labour Party?
I was previously, and I'm not a Labour supporter for life. I've been a floating voter. I voted Conservative, Green, Dem, Labour.
You're a real floating voter, yeah.
I am, yeah. So I wouldn't vote for Labour while Corbyn hasn't made his position clear. OK, fine.
Josh, thank you for that. I'm going to go to Martin in Huntingdon. Martin, are Labour about, as I see it, to completely betray all their promises on Brexit?
Good evening, Nigel.
Good evening.
Without a doubt, and so are the Conservatives. And I personally won't be watching or listening to it. If Mrs May wishes to actually have a discussion, there's only one person she should be discussing with us openly, and that's you, on television, because we need the facts, and we're not getting the facts from either side. So really, what difference does it make? But you know what really worries me, Nigel, is the fact that we've had the largest democratic vote in this country, a people's vote, which is now being totally ignored. No mention of Parliament was ever made, and it has to go through Parliament. If our vote, and I'm a Brexiter, I voted, I've been a member of UKIP, so that would give you an idea.
You are a full-on Brexiteer, yeah.
I mean, if I don't have anybody from UKIP in my district, I will not be voting. It's as simple as that.
No, I think a lot of people feel that way. So you basically, your view, Martin, is the whole political establishment is betraying Brexit.
Oh, without a doubt. But you know what hasn't, I don't believe, been brought up before, Nigel, is the fact that if we are going to be betrayed thoroughly by the remaining people, that's the establishment, the Home Office, the whole crooked lot of them, and in my view, my opinion is, May is a pathological liar anyway. Excuse me, that's my opinion, so you can't be...
It's an opinion, yes, it is an opinion, a very strong one.
Yeah, but the main point is, if we're going to face the final betrayal, what image is that going to be portrayed abroad when this country loves to criticise other countries for their lack of democracy?
Martin, I think the truth is, Martin, we're a bit of a laughing stock at the moment anyway. Martin, thank you for your call. Steve on Facebook says, I think Labour will try anything to get into power. And Steve, in Westminster, they've convinced themselves that a second referendum will help them get into power. I think when you get out into Labour Party voting areas of the Midlands, the North and South Wales, it might be different. Craig says, what's the point of a debate between May and Corbyn? They're both totally useless. Well, whether they're useless or not, wouldn't it be odd, Craig, to see a Remainer, Theresa May, arguing for leave, and a Leaver, Jeremy Corbyn, effectively arguing Remain? I can't see what it would achieve. Thomas is calling from Worthing. Good evening, Thomas.
Good evening. The two mainstream parties are desperately trying to maintain a two-party system, and it's getting incredibly boring. You've got the Labour Party, who are trying to maintain a kind of soft Brexit stance, and the Tories are now aping them, basically. They're also putting on this facade of a soft Brexit. The reality is people voted for Brexit. The Labour Party are trying to maintain their hold on Leave voting communities where you've got older Leave voters who they need, but at the same time maintain the future youth vote, which is, leaning obviously towards remaining in the EU. So sooner rather than later, I think they will come out and back a people's vote. The only incredible shame is that we have no third party that people can opt for.
You've got the Lib Dems. You've got the Lib Dems. But they're even more pro-Remain, and of course UKIP is still out there.
UKIP aren't credible anymore under Gerard Batten. I'd love for UKIP to be credible. I'd love to be able to vote for them, but as long as they're going along this anti-Muslim line, I just can't support them. Which is why, I know you're quite hesitant about going back into it, but something needs to be done.
Thomas,
it needs to be right now.
Thomas, we will be debating UKIP over the course of the next 10, 12 days, I promise you, because you're right. Potentially, they could be playing a much bigger role than they are at the moment. Thank you for the call. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's now 6:15 and time for the news headlines with Lisa Aziz. Labour seem to be becoming more and more Remain, including a comment by John McDonnell that it may well be inevitable that they're going to back a second referendum / people's vote. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister is in an aeroplane. She's on her way to Argentina for the G20 summit. She'll be away for a couple of days. History says, very dangerous time for party leaders and prime ministers to go away when there are those that wish to get rid of you. So the G20 meet, and one of the centerpieces of this, there was supposed to be a meeting between Donald Trump and the Russian President Vladimir Putin, but we've heard within the last couple of hours that meeting has been abruptly cancelled. The President pinning the cancellation on Russia's refusal to release Ukrainian Navy ships and sailors seized during that maritime confrontation between the two countries on Sunday. So all not well between those two countries. We'll see how Mrs May gets on at the G20. Jay says, Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, Tom Watson's area, voted 67.3% to leave. So he'll have problems being re-elected here. Well, Jay, there are lots of them in this position. West Midlands, North of England and South Wales. And I think Jeremy Corbyn has been very conscious of that. He managed quite cleverly in the general election to get Leavers in the North to vote Labour and Remainers in London to vote Labour. But I guess that can't last forever. I do feel, though, the dynamic, the pressure within Westminster for Corbyn to move to this position, and you can see McDonnell heading in that direction. Maybe McDonnell thinks he could be the next leader of Labour. I don't know. I'm going to go to Newham and speak to Mike. Mike, are Labour shifting significantly?
Nigel, to be honest, I actually don't think they are. I think they're keeping to their line at conference, which was they're going to force a general election first, and then if that doesn't happen, then all options are on the table, including a second referendum or people's vote, how it's been badly renamed.
But a general election isn't going to happen, Mike, is it?
Well, shall I tell you why I think it might? All it needs to happen is there is a no confidence vote in Parliament Theresa May, and then I think they have 2 weeks to come up. Government has to form, and then if it can't, a minority government can form. Then there needs to be a general election.
But you also, Mike, have the problem now. It's more difficult than it used to be because, of course, we do have the Fixed Term Parliaments Act. But look, Mike, I'm not saying a general election is impossible. Of course I'm not. Yeah. But let's assume, for the sake of this conversation, that there isn't a general election. are Labour going to push? I mean, are Labour going to accept? I mean, the Labour Party, Mike, put down some amendments today, which go to the Speaker, and some of this is going to get voted on December the 11th. One of the things that Labour want to put down as an amendment is to sort of make it impossible for us to leave with a WTO-style deal. If this gets voted down, Mike, what are Labour going to do? Are they going to allow us to leave on WTO terms? It doesn't sound like they are, so the other alternative would be a suspension of Article 50 and a referendum.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I see two different scenarios. I think if that happened, if May's deal didn't come through and they couldn't get a general election and we were going for like a WTO Brexit, I think I can't see a second referendum would get. Do you think it'd get past Parliament? Do you reckon there'd be enough people in it?
At the moment, no. At the moment, no. There is not a majority for a second referendum. And you've got people like Caroline Flint, a Labour MP for Doncaster, making it very clear that there are plenty of people there at the moment opposed to a second referendum. I mean, Mike, you're a Labour supporter, yeah?
Yeah, and you know, I voted Remain, but I think we should just get on with it now. And what I want is the general election, because you've got to think that the reason why people voted Brexit in the first place, and all these Labour heartlands and stuff, you see it's communities that have had like no investment for years. We've had public services cut, and I think that's what Labour are trying to do is trying to see the bigger picture. But I think they should go. I think it'd be a disaster, to be honest, if we had a second referendum, because I think you'd see the rise of the far right. I think Leave would win again, and I think we'd be leaving on terms that.
And we'd become a very angry country. Yeah. Mike, thanks for the call. That's great. Going to go to Barnsley. Speak to Gavin, who's a new caller. Good evening, Gavin.
Hi, Nigel. What people don't seem to forget is two things really. 150 Labour constituencies voted to leave.
Yep.
Which is obviously the majority of their MPs.
Yep.
Obviously in Barnsley, both MPs remain. Westminster Mary, as in Mary Cree and Wakefield, remain. They all lost massively, and they've never recovered from it, and they've never accepted it. Now, the issue is, Jeremy Corbyn goes back to the people for another referendum. For him to get through his socialistic ideas, he could never be tied to the EU to get his ideas through.
No,
in
that's
the UK.
Absolutely.
And people seem to forget that, Nigel.
Gavin, I did 2 nights ago. I talked about the state aid rules that we're bound to in the political declaration, and I made the point that actually Labour couldn't do many of the things it wanted to do. And Corbyn knows that, Gavin. He understands that. Of
course he does, but this is what he's, in a way, he's deceiving his voters and so forth. Now, I go on the doors every day, Nigel, and I can assure you, if there was a general election, which I don't think it would be, but if there was, it would be one of the weirdest ones. Anna Soubry's absolutely finished. Labour will win that seat. Penn and Stocksbridge, if the Tories get their act together, they will take that. They will take Wakefield. So the sort of seats will be all moved all over the place. It'll be very difficult to predict who would win what seats. But
I think it would do. But
I think Anna Soubry's finished. We know that because of the pledges and so forth. And you know yourself, when you speak to people on the doors, it's completely different on social media.
And yet, Gavin, in Barnsley, you're two, and Barnsley, strong Leave town, and yet your 2 MPs are both strongly Remain, and yet they're both going to win again, aren't they?
Well, they've got their own problems, or certainly Dan Jarvis has, because obviously he's double jobbed at the moment.
Well, I'm not going to get into that, Gavin. But the point I'm making,
targeting them now.
Yeah, but the point I'm making, Gavin, is that given our electoral system, actually many of our MPs can get away with betraying the Brexit vote.
Of course they can, and that's the problem we have with the first past the post system.
It is, yeah, it is.
But there is certain marginals now. Where, to be fair to Jeremy Corbyn, and let's give the Labour Party credit last year in the general election, they proved that certain seats aren't actually safe seats no more. There is, apart from the few obvious ones, there is some seats now that are
but two-thirds of them still are, I'm afraid. Gavin, prediction from you. Will Corbyn be forced by his parliamentary party into heading towards, in the event of May's deal failing, of heading towards a second referendum?
Yes, because he'll do anything it takes to get into number 10, Nigel.
OK, Gavin, thank you very much indeed for that cynicism. From Barnsley, let's go to Herne Bay in Kent and speak to Michael, a new caller. Good evening, Michael.
Hello, Nigel. Nice to speak to you.
Good to speak to you.
in the past, I've always voted Conservative, but never again. I've listened to what John McDonnell said, etc. today, and I'll be very tempted to vote Labour at the moment.
Can I just ask you very, very quickly, Michael, what is the reason you would not vote Conservative again?
Nigel, I listened to Mrs May this morning in front of all the chairmen of the various committees. Happened to catch it on the television.
Yep.
She could not answer a single question. All you got from her, it'll be, further negotiations when we left. She could not answer a single question that was put to her by any of the chairmen of the various committees.
Okay, but
so she doesn't know herself, does she?
So do you think Corbyn and McDonnell might do a better job?
Nigel.
Do you know what? I reckon that about 20 million people who would answer that question the same way as you've just done, Michael.
What else do we do now? At the moment?
That is a question people are asking, but
exactly.
Okay, so you're very disenchanted with your Conservatives, and you're thinking about Labour.
Very, very disenchanted.
Okay.
Very, very disenchanted.
Right. Michael, thanks for the call. So there we are. And the point that was made with the previous caller, of course, there are individual constituencies around the country that can produce all sorts of results if there was a general election. But overall, the point does stay that 2/3 of seats just won't change because that's the electoral system that we have got. Bob says, maybe we need 15% interest rates for people to wake up and vote Labour. Well, we'll see. Nigel, Mrs May is about to surrender the Falkland Islands, says Phil in Liverpool, because she's gone to Argentina. Well, she's prepared to make concessions, of course, on Northern Ireland and on Gibraltar, so maybe she'll chuck in the Falklands for good measure. Phil, I tell you what, I think that really might be just the straw that really does break the camel's back, but it's a good, amusing comment. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's now 6:30 and time for the news headlines with Lisa Aziz. John McDonnell, I think he's let the cat out of the bag when he agreed in an interview that actually Labour could move towards supporting a second referendum / people's vote. I think that's where Labour are going. I think they're going to become a party full on for Remain, especially if Mrs May cannot get this withdrawal agreement through the House of Commons. It's all coming up very, very soon. Now, this morning, the chief negotiator for the European Union, Michel Barnier, was in the European Parliament to much acclaim, including some quite strong praise from me. I'm in no doubt that this withdrawal agreement is a good deal. It's a good deal because it involves large transfers of money. It's a good deal because it maintains free movement of people. It's a good deal because it keeps Britain in the customs union and stuck with the EU's rulebook. And crucially, there is the backstop, which means, of course, the United Kingdom can be held effectively as a hostage for many years to come. For the UK, I think it's probably the worst deal in history. No, Mr Barnier, I have to say, I wish you were on our side, really, because it's game, set and match to you. You probably can't even believe your luck that you came up against the British Prime Minister who met every single demand of yours whilst at the same time trying to deceive the British public. Well, he did rather enjoy that, I have to say. And you've got to say, I mean, I'm not on his side at all, but he has done an amazing job. I can't see a single concession that he's made at any point to Theresa May. But what was curious this morning in the European Parliament was an assumption coming from everybody that the British Parliament is going to ratify Theresa May's deal. So I asked Barnier a direct question about this. The political declaration, you haven't got to give us anything. You don't need to give us a thing. And that is why this is going to fail in Parliament and probably fail by a very big margin. Mr Barnier, you say this is the only possible deal, but this deal isn't going to be accepted. So perhaps we all need to grow up and recognise that there is a strong chance now of the UK leaving on March the 29th with a WTO no deal. We need a negotiated deal to deal with sensible border issues. I wonder, Mr Barnier, are you prepared for that? Because you seem this morning to assume that the British Parliament is going to ratify this. It isn't. Now, he didn't answer it directly. He just said that he doesn't deal in polemics. And afterwards, I spoke to him. one-to-one. He's always very polite and very nice to me. He really is. And I said, come on, Monsieur Barnier, you must see there is a real strong chance that she will not get this deal through. And under the current legislation, that means we are leaving. There could be interventions and changes, but under the current legislation, that means we're leaving on March the 29th, and we'll have to do it on WTO terms, but we've got to negotiate on border issues, etc. And he just looked at me blankly, and he said, no, it will pass. So the one thing that I've really come home with today is an understanding that there is almost no preparation that has taken place in Brussels whatsoever for us leaving on WTO terms, just as there were no preparations in Brussels or London for us voting to leave in the referendum in the first place. I wonder how extensive our own government's preparations really are if we're leaving on those terms. I would guess pretty insufficient. I'm going to go and speak to Lizzie, a new caller from Walthamstow. Good evening, Lizzie.
Oh, hello, Nigel. Hi.
Hi. So is the Labour Party moving towards this position, Lizzie?
Well, I think as they said in the conference, their conference motion at conference, that if they weren't able to obtain a general election, then, all options are on the table. But I just wanted to correct you in that there was recently a consultation given out to all Momentum members.
Yep.
And it's not actually accurate to say that, Momentum is strongly in favour of a people's vote. 41% supported a people's vote, but 57% either prioritised a general election over a people's vote or didn't want a public vote at all.
Yeah,
and certainly in Walthamstow, I mean, I'm a Labour Party member. I'm also a member of Momentum. Mm-hmm. And certainly the arguments for and against a people's vote, they're very sort of strong on both sides. And I think with the people's vote, you have some very strong voices, people like Chupa Amuna and indeed my own MP, Stella Creasy. But I think there is an underbelly of people, Labour Party members, who recognise the very real democratic deficit in just marching towards the people's vote, and who also recognise the danger inherent for the Labour Party in that position.
Oh, and that's absolutely right with these, the 5 million voters that we've talked about before. Lizzie, the point I was making was that Momentum are pro-EU, and given the Labour Party's position that it's a general election they want, and it'll only be a second referendum, if that's not achieved. I actually read the Momentum figures differently to you. In that I read the fact that, given that set of circumstances, the fact that openly 43% want a second referendum in 41% in preference to a general election.
No, it's the other way around. 41% supported the people's vote.
Yes.
57% either prioritised a general election over a people's vote or do not want a public vote.
So only 57%. Only 57% voted that way, and 41% went against the party's current position. That's a big...
Oh, yes. No, I'm not going to disagree with you that there is, there are people, and indeed quite a few MPs, who are pushing and indeed trying to interpret the conference motion as calling for people's vote, which of course it doesn't.
Lizzie, let me ask you something. As a Momentum member and committed Labour supporter...
Indeed.
If Mrs May's deal cannot get through the House of Commons, and none of us at the moment know what the answer to that is, but it does look as though she's really going to struggle. So let's just say in a couple of weeks' time, we find that the withdrawal agreement has not been agreed with the House of Commons. What would you then, as a Momentum supporter, like to see? Would you like to see us leave on the current legislation on WTO terms, or would you be pushing for a second referendum in those circumstances?
That's a very, very difficult question. I certainly wouldn't like Parliament to abrogate to itself what it considers it already has, which is the right to decide that we should remain. I wouldn't be keen on that. I would think that was completely wrong. I mean, I would want a solution that supported workers' rights and got the best deal for the country. I don't think a people's vote would answer that question, and it may be that leaving on WTO terms is really the only solution.
Okay, interesting. No, Lizzie, I know it's a really hard question to put to you, and it sounded a bit hypothetical, but you know what? We could actually be facing this in 2 weeks' time, couldn't we?
I think we could. I think we absolutely could. And, you know, it's just so essential now that people start telling the truth. I mean, even the sort of, I can't remember what the organisation is called, but even there's maybe the Association of Medical Practice, they've put out an extraordinary video on YouTube, sort of saying that, you know, if Brexit happens, we're going to lose the National Health Service.
I know. It's nonsense.
It's appalling, the arguments that are being put out.
Yeah.
You know, but it's very nice to talk to you.
Lizzie,
and I just wanted to...
No, listen,
you know,
I don't get many Momentum members that ring me up.
Oh, why?
And those that do...
Can't imagine why, Nigel.
And those that do want a shouting match. And you didn't. You wanted a proper debate. And I thank you very much indeed for your call. Thank you. Lillian on Facebook has almost given up. She says, nothing but a miracle will get us out of this mess. Jeremy is a new caller from Solihull. Good evening, Jeremy.
Good evening, Nigel. The point I wanted to make was that I think that... sorry, I'm suffering from a senior moment.
John McDonnell is the man we were talking about. Yeah,
hasn't got the faintest idea what he's talking about. He probably went to the same school as Diane Abbott.
That's very cruel.
Not at all. But I think they're just coming and going. I think the whole issue now is, as the lady said earlier, it's about honesty. And it's also about sovereignty. Labour haven't got a hope in hell of achieving anything that they want to bring through, so their calls for bring it on, let's have a general election, is complete nonsense. Conservatives are talking about... Mrs May's talking about her things, which again sound as if it's complete nonsense. What we actually need now is for the Brexiteers to get together from both sides of the House.
Yep.
And to actually pull a deal together that actually works.
The trouble is, Jeremy, the trouble is they're not the ones negotiating. It's the government, the civil service, and a very pro-EU cabinet.
Absolutely. Well, this is where honesty comes in and everything else. And I think that, I mean, I was horrified to hear that Trump made an offer to Mrs May 4 months ago, which she's turned down.
Yep.
I mean, it just beggars belief, the whole thing.
It is an absolute shambles, isn't it?
The other article I read was about Switzerland, where they have now put the screws on the Swiss, who are masters at deviousness. And they're basically saying to them, if you don't accept our terms, we will cut you off and we will shut the Swiss bourse down. And that's going to happen by the end of the year.
Well,
so how on earth Mrs May thinks she's going to be able to negotiate with the EU negotiators?
Yeah, but equally, Jeremy, they've got huge problems with Italy and with Hungary and with Poland. And, yeah, they're very good at being big bullies, but they've got their problems. Jeremy, I thank you. Nigel, 2 problems with the second referendum. Who decides the question? And what if Remain won 52%, but only got 16 million votes? What would it solve, says Chris in Darlington? Well, one MP, Joe Johnson, was putting forward today his thoughts on what the question might be. We'll get to that in a moment, but for now, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show on LBC. It's 6:46 and time for the news headlines with Lisa Aziz. Sir John McDonnell says it may be inevitable that Labour will call for a second referendum and the party try and backtrack a little bit on that, but I do think the Labour Party are headed in this direction, and I'm pretty sure they're going to go there if Theresa May's withdrawal agreement gets voted down. But before the break, I was asked by Chris, what should the question be? Well, what's happening here is the second referendum People's Vote campaign are trying to set that agenda now. They're trying to set the question now. Let's listen to former Transport Minister Boris's brother, Joe Johnson, speaking to Robert Peston yesterday.
2.5 years negotiating this deal which we have before us. It's a 585-page withdrawal agreement, 26-page of waffle in the political declaration. This is the negotiated Brexit. There isn't another deal on the table. This is the choice the country has before us. There isn't a prospect of reopening the negotiation. There isn't a prospect of concluding a complicated Norway forever, which is the EEA plus customs union forever, in the timelines available. It's simply not achievable. It's a fantasy and a distraction. The core choices before us are the Prime Minister's deal, or putting the question back to the people to ask them to consider whether they actually want to crash out of the EU with no deal at all.
Well, Joe Johnson firmly backing it, but he wants Remain to be on the ballot paper. And this is the problem. What would the question be? And nobody has satisfactorily managed to answer that. Some even suggest it should be this deal or Remain, in which case I'd simply have to boycott the second referendum because I wouldn't be given the choice that I want. Is this gaining momentum? Well, I think it is gaining some momentum within the Labour Party, but I think that's what will happen if this deal doesn't go through. I suspect the Labour Party then are going to move to that position, regardless of how you voted out there. And there are 5 million of you who voted Leave and who voted Labour in 2017. Adam is calling from Rotherham, a big Labour area. Hi, Adam.
Hiya, Nigel. Well, basically, in Rotherham, we voted 72% to leave.
Wow.
And actually, the MP is one of your good friends, Sarah Champion.
And she's very, very pro-Remain.
Exactly. How can she represent the will of Rotherham? I've lived there all my life. And how can she represent the large majority? It's not this 52-48% small majority. It's a massive majority. How can she represent us? And that's what I feel it is. A lot of these Labour areas, their MPs, they're very, especially Labour, they're very pro-Remain, and yet they're going against the large majority of their constituencies.
Well, Adam, she can do what she likes. Because
it's a safe seat.
Because it's a safe seat, she's going to get re-elected. There are other seats. There are other seats in which, and certainly in the north there are quite a few, in which Labour could be very vulnerable. This is not plain sailing for Labour. It's not plain sailing for either party. In fact, Adam, the best thing is if they both just split, really, isn't it?
Do you know what I think, right, Nigel? I know you've gone into pressure groups now. Pressure groups, no offence, they're not going to do anything. The way we've got the referendum was votes, challenging them at the ballot box. The only way we're going to make Labour go the way the will of the people wants them to go is challenging them, taking away the safe seats. Jane Collins in Rotherham, she got, let's say, a fair amount of votes compared to a Labour safe seat in that area. That's how you're going to get it.
That was in the Rotherham by-election where UKIP got 26% or whatever it was. Yeah, no, I do remember that. I do remember that, Adam. Adam, clearly the threat of UKIP did make a very, very big difference. But equally, you also, to fight referendums, have to have cross-party campaigns and groups. Adam, thanks very much indeed for the call. Alan from Belfast says, Nigel Barnier didn't need to play a blinder. Mrs May handed him everything on a plate from the word go. Well, we did accept the sequencing. We have made concession after concession. They've given us nothing back. But, folks, on the 13th of December, when the next European summit takes place, she may well be going there asking for concessions, because it looks pretty likely she's going to lose this vote on December the 11th. Philip from Whiteleaf says, our politicians have learnt nothing. They still think they can ignore the electorate and there will be no consequences. Bill is a new caller from Bangor. Good evening, Bill. Nope, he's gone. Sarah is calling from Luxembourg. Hi, Sarah.
Hey, Nigel.
So are Labour moving towards the second referendum people's vote position?
I think they might be, and finally they might have a unified and a single opinion on the topic. But I think it's a little bit too late, too little too late, and also I think the second referendum is not going to resolve any of the issues that we're finding ourselves in.
So is that because you think the second referendum would go the same way as the first one?
Well, for a few things. One, I don't think people's opinions have changed since the referendum 2 years ago, because the situation hasn't evolved enough for people to see the consequences either way. So there's kind of no point. The only real thing that happened is the devaluation of the pound, but it's going to take a while for people to really feel it. So I don't think people have changed their opinions. The second issue I have with that is that it's going to be, like you were saying, if they have to ask what's going to be the question.
Yeah, and that's a real difficult issue. Yeah, no, and Sarah, on the pound devalued more from 2008 until the referendum than it has since. So we've been in a big downward move as far as that's concerned. So Sarah, if you think the second referendum is going to solve nothing, what do you think Labour's position ought to be then?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I'm going to have to come back on the point you made around the pound, because that's not actually accurate.
Oh, it certainly is. Yes,
saying,
it fell a lot more from 2008 to 2016 than it's fallen from 2016 to 18. Yes.
Yeah, of course. So it fell more over 8 years than it did over 2 years. That's not a good thing.
Well, I could show you a period in 2008-9 when it fell. Listen, I'm not going to argue about the pound, all right? I know what the pound was and what it is. But what do you think Labour's position ought to be?
I think everybody's stuck. I think we're all stuck. I don't really see a way out, to be fair, because I think Theresa May is going to get her deal approved in Parliament at the end.
You do? Okay. No, well, history suggests, Sarah, you're right. In the end, normally governments get big things through. I'm not so sure, though. Thank you for your call. Dee in Kent says, Labour are running out of ideas and credible policies. A second vote is a hiding place. I'm going back to Bangor in Wales to speak to Bill, a new caller. Good evening, Bill.
Good evening, Nigel. Thank you for having me on.
But not one bit. So I think that McDonald's let the cat out of the bag. I think that's where Labour are going, towards a people's vote second referendum. What say you?
Nigel, I think that you're right, and I think that it was always going to be going that way. If you remember when Corbyn was elected in the 2 leadership elections, he said he was going to listen to the members of the party. Yep. Uh-huh. And the members of Labour are largely in support of Remain or a people's vote. But he's going to use that as justification, because I think he will be looking very closely. Did you see the poll that came out in the Daily Mail about Theresa May's deal and about a people's vote?
I was very sceptical about the way that was put. But anyway, Bill, we're running out of time, I'm sorry to say. But if Labour do move towards the second referendum people's vote position, will it cost them at the next election?
I think they'll be looking at the polls very carefully and the people's vote gaining momentum, and they'll be thinking, actually, maybe this could work, this could be good for us, this could get us into Westminster.
Well, that's what they'll think, and yet there's 5 million Labour voters out there. Hey, we'll see. Bill, I thank you, and I think Julia sums it all up, really. None of the politicians are carrying out the instructions of 17.4 million people. They should all be sacked. That's probably being said, Julia, in pubs and clubs up and down this country as we speak. I am going to be back on Sunday morning at 10 a.m. At 10 p.m. tonight, it's Tom Swarbrick, but up next, it's Ian Dale.
Nigel, have you seen Professor Vernon Bogdanor, what he said? He said if there should be another referendum,